And are we good to go? Everybody here?
You're all set.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of the Detroit Regional Chamber and the Detroit Promise, as well as the Alumni Association, quite a few groups there, I would like to thank you for joining us today for our first webinar, the Kickoff to Financial Freedom series. We've listened to our students and our guests to determine exactly what their needs are and what they want to hear from topics. And so we're so grateful to have leaders in the consulting and banking world here today to help us with our first financial literacy series. So I'm Shantae. I'm a coach for Macomb Community College and also the Alumni Association Success Coordinator. And I am really excited to have join us today from Deloitte, our Managing Director of Policy, Strategy, and Compliance, Judy Hedgeland, and Quadri Awoya, the Manager for Engagement Financial Advisory Practice. So thank you so much for joining us today.
So great to be here. Thank you so much for that warm introduction.
Thank you very much.
And so can we pull up the slides? We'll go to the next slide. Excellent. And maybe one more slide. And so let me just start by sharing a little bit about Deloitte. So Deloitte is the largest professional services firm in the world. We have over $23 billion in revenue in the US and about $50 billion in revenue in the worldwide network of Deloitte. We are in 126 offices in the US and 150 countries worldwide. In the US alone, we have about 121,000 and growing employees, and worldwide, we're over 345,000 people strong. We're in 97 cities in just the US alone. And so why is this size and scale important? Well, the size of the firm means that we can have excellent development opportunities for our people, investing in our people. We are able to invest in really important strategic initiatives like inclusion, diversity, our community impact, what we do in the communities, as well as provide excellent career paths for all of our people. And so size and scale is definitely important and enables us to do that. The purpose of Deloitte is to make an impact that matters by creating trust and confidence in a more equitable society. And I want to talk a little bit about how we do that. So we'll go to the next slide. So we serve our clients across 4 key businesses. So audit and assurance, consulting, risk and financial advisory, and tax. We hire people with all kinds of skill sets to work at Deloitte to serve our clients in this space. We serve some of the most innovative companies in the world, and we also are very innovative ourselves. And so we're constantly developing new technologies, new skills in order to bring that to our people and to our clients. And so what we want to talk to you about today, we'll go to the next slide, is budgeting for success. And so budgeting is, we'll stay on the prior slide for just a minute. Why is budgeting important? Well, so many of you, you're all in different stages. Some of you are recent college graduates, some of you are still in college. And you may be facing the first time where you're really independent and you're faced with new costs that you haven't had before. Maybe you're paying rent for the first time. Maybe you're paying, for your own groceries for the first time. Maybe you've been under your parents' roof, or, at a college living on campus, before this. This is probably the first time that you will make a pretty sizable income, when you graduate, from college, probably more money than what you've made before. And so I remember when I graduated from college and I received my salary, and of course this was like 27 years ago, so it was a lot lower than new starts are making now. I thought I was rich, and yeah. I wanted to go out and, spend money. But the fact of the matter is that the world is pretty expensive, and it's important to really think about how we spend our money, how we save our money so that we can earn financial independence later on. So that's what we're going to talk to you about today, is really how to make sure that you're budgeting for success and thinking about your income in the right way to be successful from a financial standpoint.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. I'm excited to have you guys here today to talk about this topic because it touches home for me personally. In the lessons learned, things that I've learned along the way, and I hope this session will provide some insights on how you guys can kind of prepare yourselves for the future and put yourselves in a good financial position. So what you have on the screen here, the big takeaway in this screen is disposable income. And what that means to everyone might be slightly different, right? So we're going to talk about really what disposable income really should mean and how you should be thinking about it. So it really is your take-home pay minus all your living expenses, the things that you need to live day to day, right? But not just that, savings. Judith mentioned savings in the earlier today. Savings is also part of that, right? So when you're talking about disposable income, it is whatever you have earned for whatever job or salary or hourly pay you make, minus your living expenses, things you have to you need to live day to day, plus your savings. Then once all of that is kind of deducted out of your take-home pay, that's truly what you have as your disposable income. And the disposable income can be used for a number of things, right? That's the fun stuff. My definition of disposable income when I first graduated was probably not right. I thought, hey, I got this big paycheck. I paid a couple of bills and hey, I have all this money left over. And I could just have fun, go to the movies, go shopping, go on a trip. But in reality, what we really should be thinking about is whatever your take-home pay is, you really should think about your living expenses plus whatever you're saving. And we'll go into the details of savings a little bit later. That really leaves your disposable income, which you have the discretion to kind of use as you see fit. So if you go to the next slide, I think it goes into a little bit more details. So here, this is kind of a breakdown of what it means to have a take-home pay. So at the top, you see it's your salary minus withholdings. So on average, you have 70% of the salary, 77% of your salary is left over after withholdings, not excluding your 401k contributions, which is money you put aside for retirement, which is really important. You know, when you're young, I was young and I didn't think I'll ever get a little older. And what you tend to find out is time flies by very quickly, which Judith could also, and everyone on this call can attest to. So when you're young, you're not really thinking about your 401k, the money set aside for retirement. It's a big thing to think about, and it has a lot of advantages for doing it very early, actually, as a matter of fact. Then you have what you call your investment income, which includes the interest and dividends, opportunities to invest, to explore HSAs and FSAs. Now, for those who do not know what that is, that's a health savings account, which comes into play for when you have healthcare expenses. Sometimes we have healthcare expenses for ourselves or sometimes our family. This is a tax-free way of saving a lot of your money aside to help pay for some of these expenses for yourselves or some of your dependent or family members. In the table that you have in here, what you see is at the top, you have salary, you have your salary, then going down the list, you have your federal and Michigan tax. We all have to pay Uncle Sam. That's the part of life that, we all have to pay Uncle Sam no matter what. There's Social Security, which is also automatically taken out of your main salary as part of retirement. There's Medicaid. Then there's right below that, the 401k contribution, which is your individual contributions to your retirement. Again, this is the opportunity for you to put stuff away to help you retire with some peace of mind. Then there's medical insurance, right? We all need insurance just in case of those emergencies, right? When we go to the doctor. Then if you decide to use HSA or FSA, if you choose to, that also comes out. Then when you have all those things taken out, your federal and Michigan tax, Social Security, Medicaid, and you contributing to your 401k and your health insurance, what's left is is what we consider your take-home pay. And in this case, in an annual salary of $55,000, take-home pay ends up being $38,831, which is roughly about 70%. And to the right of that is what you see as a breakdown of the same different categories by monthly. Now, why is this important? It's important because these, your federal taxes, your Social Security, these are things that are automatically going to be deducted from your annual salary, whatever it is you are making at whatever job you have. Your contributions for 401k, I tend to look at that also as a must because you're also trying to plan for the future, right? So consider that as a must that comes out of your pay, just like your taxes, because when you get older, you want to be able to look back like, wow, I made those right decisions when I was 23, 24. So that at the age of 35, 36, you're like, wow, I put about almost 10 to 15 years worth of savings. I feel a little bit more comfortable, right? So that's really what you have to think about when it comes to take-home pay. It is your annual salary with taxes reduced, Social Security, Medicaid, your 401k, and any insurance that you have. If you go to the next slide.
And so Quadri talked about take-home pay. And so if you remember from the prior slide, it was about 38,000, give or take a few dollars, starting with a salary north of $50,000. And Quadri made the point, it's about 70% of your income. So what comes out of that 38,000 now? So let's talk about what it costs to live, in this day of age. And so what we've done is we tried to put together, just an estimate of what costs might be. And there's lots of caveats to these costs, right? So, for example, rent, so we reserved $500 a month for rent. That would assume that you're in an apartment, probably living with a couple roommates, in a reasonably priced apartment. If you chose to have your own apartment, for example, it'd probably be about 3 times that cost in today's, market, or if you wanted to rent a house with friends. So, we use something that was more conservative. Utilities and internet, easily $180 a month. Student loans, other debt. So some of you may have, graduated with some sort of debt, that you have. And so that comes with a cost, or you might have credit card debt or other things that you're paying off. Phone. So your monthly phone bill, I know my phone bill is in excess of this, but, perhaps I think that this is more of the average, rate of phone bill. Groceries, that's going to vary too, and are you going to go to the nicest grocery store and, buy all of your groceries there? You're going to clip some coupons and get some savings, you might be able to save some money off the groceries. Auto and rent insurance. So, Quadri alluded to medical insurance, but there's other kinds of insurance that you really need to have in order to protect yourself from accidents, at your, in your vehicle, or, fire in your apartment and all of your belongings. So that can be costly. Work expenses. So some companies, don't pay for parking, for example, and you have to pay for parking.
Yep.
Go and you work for that company, depending on where they're located. You're going to need work clothes, and those come at a cost. And maybe you want to eat lunch, when you go to work. And so you might want to go out to lunch and, grab something or a coffee. And so those are the type of work expenses that you could expect to have. Car payment. So
Yep.
you might be leasing a car or buying a car, and cars are not inexpensive anymore, right, Quadri?
Right.
Those are going up and up and up.
Yep.
Gas, same comment. Gas is getting more expensive, and so that can be costly. Fitness, so I love a good workout. That's not free,
Yep.
So there's fitness apps, which is probably at the lower end of the cost, which is what we costed out here, or you could join a more expensive gym. which could be, more costly. And then we recommend a contingency. And so because these costs can fluctuate, right? Your phone bill might be, different each month, or groceries could, vary each month. So we recommend at least a 10% contingency. And so all of your living expenses come down to about $27,500. So if you remember, the prior slide was about 38,000. Now we're at 27,000 of living expenses. Quadri is going to try to bring this all together for us.
Yeah, and just to add to that, she went through all these items that are what we would consider cost of living, and I think for every one of us, a lot of these things that are listed here are considered must-haves, right? Now, for some of us, we might have a little bit longer list, which is nice to have, right? And some of us might consider that just what I need to live. So I think it's also important to keep that in mind, right? When you create your own list of the things that you need to live, right? Think about it from the perspective, what are the must-haves and what are the things that I have flexibility on, right? An example would be if you have a job that actually gives you a car to drive around, maybe you don't have to own a car payment, right? You can get a used car, or you're with a company that gives you some subsidies for fitness. Maybe that's an expense you don't have to incur, right? And that's savings that you can either put in your contingency or add it somewhere else, right? So those are things you want to also think about it when you're thinking about living expenses and what are the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. I talk about this all the time with my daughter, and she still doesn't get it. Next slide. So savings. This I will consider this my favorite slide, okay? Because savings comes into play on almost everything we do. And I learned this a long time ago. It's not about how much you make, is what you do with what you make, right? So how much of it are you saving? You can make $1 million a month. If you're spending $1.2 million, you're gonna be broke. So really the key is how much of it are you saving, right? And that's really the key to how to help put yourself in the right position. So if you think about it, the first bullet it touches me personally because I learned that a little later in my career, in my adulting phase of life than I should have, which is pay yourself first. What does that mean, right? Some of you might have heard that phrase. What it means is once you have calculated your take-home pay, you take a portion of that, whatever percentage, and in this case, it's saying 20% of your salary, pay yourself. So you take 20% and you put it to the side before you do anything else. That is paying yourself. This is me saying, Quadri, for my salary, I'm putting 20% aside, and this is going to be for me, right? That's what it really means to pay yourself first. Then you can start to go down the line of some of these other items listed here, which is fund your 401k. I alluded to that earlier, which is your 401k might not be something you're thinking about when you just get your first job and you get that first paycheck. There's a survey that showed, kids right out of college, they don't think about retirement when they get their first job, but it's important to think about it because it sets you up. Incremental savings you make at an early age actually snowballs into a huge nest egg that comes into play. So if you have matching 401ks that your employers are offering, please take advantage of it. They call it free money, right? You always take advantage. If your employer is going to match 3%, 6%, take advantage of it. It's free money that you don't have to add into your nest egg. I mentioned the HSA, which is exploring these health savings accounts, which again, you can leverage them for a lot of long-term healthcare savings, medical expenses, for yourselves or your loved ones, which really has a huge impact on our financial stability. There's a study that shows, one medical scare can bankrupt a family, right? So leveraging these healthcare savings accounts is a real thing that you should really look into. So if you go to your employers, ask if they offer it. Then finally, right below that, you have the automatic deposit funds into savings and investment accounts. The reason why this is also really important is sometimes out of sight, out of mind. You can set up your salary to be automatically allocated to certain accounts at percentages, right? And that helps you put money away without even thinking about it. Below that, an important piece is maintaining 3 to 6 months of expenses in emergency cash. Now, why is that important? Because as we go through life, we run through emergencies, the unexpected, that you don't plan for. And a lot of times when those things happen, you want to feel like you have some contingency cash that can help address those unplanned expenses, right? Or occasions where, maybe something happened and maybe you had to step away from your job. Do you have 3 months of your monthly expenses to cover? This says 3 to 6 months. I think it should be more than 6 months. I think it should be longer, honestly, right? And one of the keys to doing that is trying to do that early in the year, right? So right now we're in February. Start to build up that savings, that nest egg, so that once you get to like April or May, you can feel comfortable with what you have in an emergency savings. Then the other part, the last piece is, if you plan on making big expenditures, like going to a big game or going to a big concert, I think Beyonce just announced her concert tour. It's probably going to cost me half of my salary just to go to a concert. Start saving for it now, right? Save for it. If you're going on a big vacation, save for it now. Don't just expect those dollars to show up. Start planning for it now. And that will really help you put in position to, one, cover those expenditures and enjoy your time and not have the burden of thinking about, wow, I'm doing all this. How am I going to pay for it? Next slide.
Awesome. Let's talk about bringing this all together. So we talked about, sort of the components. So Quadri covered, we were okay on the slide that we were on. Yep, disposable income. So Quadri talked about, sort of your take-home pay, and then I covered expenses and what it costs, just for normal living expenses. And then Quadri talked about savings, right? And so what's left is disposable income. So this is the money that you can go out and, have fun with, right? And so what we recommend is that you take your disposable income budget and you break it down to a weekly allowance. And so so what that might look like is, okay, I've got $50 a week or $40 a week that is mine to spend. And so I can use that to go out to a nice meal, with my friends, or I could use it to, maybe buy, a new pair of shoes or, something that I need for fun. But I know that I've got that money that's set aside just for fun, for just, exactly what it says. You don't want to spend in excess of your disposable income in any one month. So you might go over it in 1 week, but then you want to course correct in the following weeks to make sure that on a monthly basis, you're not exceeding your budget, because then that can become kind of a habit, right? You want to balance your checking account every month, for those of you, who are writing checks or, have at least activity that's coming out of your checking account. So you might have your salaries, automatically deposited, and then you've got, lots of things that you're paying out of your checking account by automatic billing and, what have you. Make sure that you're on top of all of that so that you know where you're at. So I think Quadri alluded to this. So disposable income, entertainment, meals out, designer clothes, gifts, so we like to go to birthday parties and celebrate our friends and family. And so love to show up with a gift and celebrate them. Toys. So I've got a lot of friends who love, boating and jet skis and snowmobile, especially in Michigan with all of our winter sports. Traveling, maybe, going on a weekend trip here or there, or, taking a longer vacation. Charitable donations. So that actually is disposable income as opposed to, a living expense, because it's still a choice, right? So with the money that we have left over, making a decision how much of that to share, with charities, is a decision that you can make. And then, of course, home furnishings and, home improvement, new TV. I mean, those kinds of things are all, what we would consider disposable income. So we can go to the next slide.
Well, before you do that, could I just piggyback on the second bullet, balancing your check-ins every month? Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the age of technology. There's a lot of apps and tools you can do. You don't have to do it the old-fashioned way, like my mom and everyone, where you sit at the kitchen table. They have wonderful apps you can leverage out there where it can help you track, give you notifications of how you're doing month to month. And if you want to get very fancy with it, you can have spreadsheets. So, it's not meant to be a burden. It's meant to let you know how you're doing month to month so you can keep track of how much money is coming in and how much money is coming out. You just mentioned, maybe one week you had gone a little bit over, but you kind of course correct the following week. One of the things me and my wife we do every week is we make sure that for us to do our week 1 week dinners, we eat in and pack lunches. So that means we're not spending money on buying lunches whenever we go into the office or going out. So all those dollars that we would have spent going out to lunch for 4 or 5 days, we will use it to treat ourselves to a wonderful evening on the weekends, right? That's a little trick that we figured out, So it's meant to try and be helpful, not necessarily to be burdensome. And you'll find that when you start to use some of these tools like tracking, your checking your balancing out your checking account every month, you'll see that it's eye-opening when I started doing it. So I highly recommend you guys do this. So here we have pulling it all together, right? So a salary of 55,000 is about results in about 3,500 in disposable income every month, or $67 a week, right? And again, this kind of goes back to my initial slide where I talked about disposable income. If you think about it, you have your take-home pay, which is again broken down. If you go from left to right, it's your salary minus you have to pay Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam, it's non-negotiable. You have to pay Uncle Sam. You have to do Social Security, Medicaid. I think your 401k is a must, as well as your medical insurance, right? And that's your take-home pay. Then Judith talked about all of the things you need to live. What are the nice to have versus the must have, right? That's your living expenses. Then in addition to that, once you've done that, well, you have one more step, savings. How much are you putting away for a rainy day? Do you have enough expenses to cover you for 3 to 6 months? I think even longer. If you were, for instance, to accidentally step away from work for whatever reason or lose your job, would you be able to cover your expenses? If your expenses come out to a certain dollar amount, do you have enough to cover that? That's a legitimate question you always have to ask yourself. And once you've done these things, then what's left really is your disposable income. And at that point, you can do whatever you choose to do with it, right? And it could be charitable donations, it could be having fun, it could be going towards restaurants or whatever it is that tickles your fancy. So really, thinking about disposable income, this is really how you should be thinking about this, right? And when you think about it this way, it puts you in a strong position to deal with whatever financial headwinds might come in the future, while also giving you peace of mind. Next slide.
I think you did a great job putting in perspective. If you think about a salary of $55,000 a year, what that translates to is about $3,500 of disposable income, fund money,
Yep.
in a year. So I think that's a good reality check.
Yeah. And that's where you find out I'm not that rich. So this slide covers credit. So full transparency, I believe as part of this program, there's going to be a very specific session that's going to be 100% dedicated to credit, right? But we're going to cover it from more of a high level. And thank you, that's going to be next week. So credit, what does it mean? We hear the word, but it's the privilege of a delayed payment extended to a buyer or borrower on the seller's or the lender's belief that what was given will be paid back, right? In layman's terms, you are delaying payment on something that you just currently purchased, right? We use credit for a number of things, whether it's we use credit sometimes to purchase a car, right? We use credit to purchase a house. We use credit to purchase sometimes clothes or vacations, right? So that's really what the idea of credit comes into play. It's the privilege of delaying payment on something that you either cannot afford completely at the moment, but guarantee to pay it back in the future. Next slide.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about consumer credit in terms of the type of credit. I'm sure that you've heard about most of these. So of course, credit cards, everybody on this call probably has a credit card, I'm just guessing. I try to keep my credit cards to a minimum. I find that every time I go to buy something at a retail store, they always want to sell me another credit card, right? And they try to lure you in with, if you get this credit card, you can get 10% off on your purchase today or 20% off on your purchase today. But I like to keep it to 2 credit cards. I always like to have a backup. So I keep one that has really good cash back. We'll talk about that, in terms of benefits of a credit card. So I love my Costco credit card because you get good cash instead, like cash back on that credit card. And then I have a backup credit card, which is a Chase credit card that just in case, because I've had my credit card has been frozen because of fraud activity before, and so you need like a second credit card. So that's what I do. Car loan is definitely a type of credit. Mortgage. So if you're buying a house, that's actually really good credit because it's going towards the purchase of an asset. And then a line of credit. So that could be, a line of credit that you take out with a bank to make improvements to a home or, other things. School loan, we talked about that before. Rent is actually a credit in terms of, you're on the hook, you sign a lease for a year. It's pretty difficult to get out of that. And then the car lease, same thing. When you sign a car lease, you're on the hook for the length of that lease. And so imagine you sign a car lease for 3 years, 2 years in, something happens financially, you can no longer afford it. That car company is still going to come after you for that lease every month. Same thing if you no longer have a need for that car, tough, you're on the hook from a lease standpoint. So we'll go to the next slide.
So what you have here, and some of you may have seen this before or not, if you've ever had to complete an application for a loan, your credit score is something that potential lenders are going to be paying very close attention to. And they have 3 major bureaus, which is Equifax, TransUnion, and Expedient. Now, each one of them has slightly different criteria for what constitutes the score that you're aligned to. I know mine for each of them are slightly different. I do not have the details. Maybe that can be something we talked about during next week's session. But you have basically a range from 300 all the way to 850. So and 850 is considered excellent. So from 760 to the 850 is considered excellent. Then as you go down the list from 700 to 759 is very good. From 660 to 669 is good. Then you have fair, poor, and very poor. Where you want to try and keep yourself is in the very good to excellent. Right, and the FICO scoring that is used to determine where you fall within this range is listed right below FICO scoring, which is your payment history. So, which means, have you been paying on time? Right, the amount of debt you have. Judith mentioned if you're renting an apartment, that plays a role. Have you been paying on time? How much debt do you have? What that means is how much are you borrowing against how much you actually have? Do you just put everything on credit? Do you have a bunch of stuff that you really cannot afford, right? Length of history. That's a really important thing that I found out myself, which is when you first start off and you don't have a long history of credit, that plays a role. They don't know much about you. They're like, we don't know if Quadri can be considered a good credit score, right? So we don't know enough about him. So the longer credit history you have, where you're showing good habits of paying on time, not accumulating a lot of debt, that is a big piece. Then account diversity, which means you might have on your credit score, the list of things you currently have credit could be, well, it could be a car, it could be a house, it could be a credit card, right? So if it's diversified, that plays a role in how you're scored. Then the final piece, which is credit inquiries. A lot of people don't realize that is anytime you go in and try to have a look up your potential eligibility credit-wise, that has an impact on how your scoring comes into play. A lot of people don't know that. So every time you go into a car dealership and they run your credit, that's considered a credit inquiry. And that's something you have to be mindful of. But again, these are just high level, where you have three major companies that focuses on your different credits. And here are the main areas that they tend to look at to how they score you. Payment history, how much debt you have, how long you have credit history, and the diversity of your accounts, and how many times you go in and apply for credit.
So a trick that I use, Quadri, just to make sure that I never miss a payment on anything is basically auto pay. So I use auto pay on just about everything. And you can set it up with some vendors where they notify you right before they're going to take it out of your account. So if there's a question or an issue, you can catch it. But that way you don't miss a payment in your credit statement. All right, we'll go to the next slide. I'm watching the time. I know we're running a little bit long, so I'm going to go a little bit quicker through this slide. So why should we care about credit? Well, lots of people look at that credit score. So Quadri talked about a couple examples. So your current creditors and lenders. So if you've got a loan, they're definitely looking at that. Potential creditors and lenders. So you go out and try to buy a car, that is the first thing that they run on you, is your credit score. Potential landlords, your insurance company, even prospective employers. I mean, they pull this information because there's a correlation between credit score and, responsibility or responsibleness in a job. And so companies do look at that. Debt collectors, utility services, and government agencies. So super important to maintain a good credit score. Go to the next slide. Quadri,
yeah, sure. So questions before using credit, which is the question I normally ask myself: can I afford it? Right. That's the first question. Second is it in my budget? Right? Will I need to pay this over time, over a long period of time? What type of credit should I use? Right? Is it worth the additional expense? Is it necessary to use credit? And will it benefit me to use credit? And these are some of the things you need to be asking yourself before you actually go and make the decision to go get a credit card or apply for credit. Right? The first one is always really important. Can I afford it? And if the answer to that is a no, then you might want to consider a different option. But these are always questions you want to. Next slide.
Okay, so what not to do. So we talked about never miss a payment. So that's super important, or even pay late. Don't co-sign on a loan if you can avoid it. I've heard some horror stories of people putting their signature on friends' loans and being on the hook for that when their friends default. Don't use credit cards for purchases that won't be paid off in full each month. And so, and sometimes there might be an emergency, but in most cases not. And don't use credit if you don't have a plan for how it'll be paid back. And lastly, avoid using credit for services or food, because this gets into, again, that habit, right? Of, if you can afford to pay it off, it's one thing, but if you're constantly putting things on credit and not having the ability to pay it off, then it can cause a problem from a habit perspective. I tend to use, I do use credit a lot, but also pay off my bills every month. And the reason why I use credit is basically to maintain good records of everything that I've spent money on. And then also because of some of the benefits of having credit, building that credit history and, some of the cash back incentives.
So what to do? Check your credit report at least annually. I would say even semi-annually if you can. Contact the creditor if you accidentally missed the payment. I've done that before. Review your statements and balances to receipts. Set up, Judith mentioned this, set up automatic payments for recurring expenses, things that you're going to pay for, set up automatic payment schedules on it. Select a credit card based on the benefits. Judith mentioned this as well, right? You use a credit card, but you get your cash backs and benefits for using them. Then pay extra on your mortgage payments. So if you have a home and you're paying on your mortgage, you pay the principal, add a little extra so you can pay that house down quicker. Then support small businesses by paying cash or using a debit card. I do that quite a bit when I go to like the Eastern market on the weekends. I take cash to support local businesses because of the charges that processing credit cards come into play. I think there might be one more slide.
There we go. We talked about some of the benefits, but we talked about that credit history. Definitely safer to carry a credit card than carrying cash. Credit cards can be canceled, if they're lost really easily. Some of them just as easy as going into an app and, saying put on hold. Protection against fraud is incredible. I know that when I mentioned that I had some fraud on my account, somebody had gone on a shopping spree while I was sleeping, and it happened overnight. And that morning, before I even woke up, there was a text from my credit card company to call them because of some potential fraudulent activity. They had already frozen my credit card. That happened almost instantaneously. It was incredible. Many credit cards do offer 0% financing in the beginning if you've got good credit history. Purchase protection, like using that Costco example. If you use the Costco credit card at Costco to buy a TV, you get an automatic warranty, on that TV, which is great. Bought a refrigerator, Costco threw in an additional year warranty. And so there's definitely some benefits to using certain credit cards. Travel insurance. So you're taking a big trip, lots of credit cards offer travel insurance, which means make sure that you check your credit card before you pay for additional travel insurance. Cash back or other rewards. We talked about record of your spending, which I'm a control freak and want to know what I spent all my money on. And so you can see all kinds of different analyses from your credit card company. That's pretty cool in terms of the top areas that you're spending. And so when you really want to challenge your budget, it's a lot easier to go back and see where you should cut. And then, it's safer than a debit card. If somebody gets a hold of your debit card and your PIN, they can clean out your account, right?
Yeah.
They get a hold of your credit card and, there's definitely some controls there. So I think that's it. So we're right at time, but Erin, do we have time, or Shawnee, do we have time for a few questions? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, we sure do. We have quite a few questions to ask, so let's get started. One of the first questions is, does checking your credit score affect your score?
And so my answer, and Quadri, I'm interested in your answer. I said checking your credit score does not, and you can do that, through various services. In fact, I'm a member of a service where they automatically do that for me, and they send me a report of my credit scores every single month. And they notify me if there's been any activity, that I should be aware of. And so there's no impact to my credit. I would say that if somebody's checking your credit because you're applying for additional credit and you take out additional credit, that's a piece that's probably going to impact your credit score.
Correct.
Okay. Another question is, let's see what we have here. Are there any benefits to donating to a charity?
And so I said, you know, absolutely from a personal sense of purpose perspective. So I'm a big fan of charitable donations and community service and, you know, helping different organizations. And from a financial perspective, you know, obviously you have the cost, but charitable donation can actually be tax deductible depending
Yep.
on your tax return on if you itemize or not. So if you itemize, you can get the tax deduction from as long as it's a legit, like meaning a registered charity, you can
Yep.
get that tax deduction.
Yep. I've done that a number of times.
Audrey also mentioned earlier about using apps and tools for budgeting. Are there any apps and tools that you personally use?
So because of my role, I actually have my own model that I created in Excel. But I know of a few apps online, which is My Personal Accountant, My Personal Saver. You look them up on Apple. I don't use any apps right now just because I have a very good system that I do. I'm in Excel every day. So, so I created one just out of my own necessity. But there's a number of them out there that you can sign up to. That again, and all they're meant to do is really give you a line of sight to say, here's how much you're spending, you know, or here's how much you're saving, and it gives you a good barometer of where you are going in the future instead of just going blindly. Like, I don't know how much I spent this week.
Is there a good age to start donating to your company's 401k program?
As
I'd
soon
say
as you
right
start.
away. Yeah.
As soon as you
Around
start.
age. Right away. And I remember when I started with Deloitte, I don't know that I could make, you know, a donation for the full amount that they matched it there. And I even, so there's two thresholds. So there's what the firm matches, right? Or what your organization matches. And then there's something called the maximum allowable contribution. So I could cover my match, but I couldn't cover the maximum allowable contribution to my 401k when I first started with Deloitte, because I think Quadri was it like 16%?
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty hefty percentage of your income when you've just started, you know, your career. But over time, you know, as my income has increased, I've increased that contribution to the maximum allowable amount to the extent that I could. So you might find, you know, a trick to financial freedom is that as your income grows, that you don't grow your expenses along with it, right? So you maintain, you know, a reasonable cost of living so that your savings can grow proportionately.
And just to add to that, I have a trick that I do. Every year when I get my evaluation and I get a pay increase, I also do an increase to my 401k. So I don't just get an increase, my 401k gets an increase. I give them a percentage of it.
That's smart.
You mentioned earlier why it's important to have a healthy track record when it comes to credit and building your budget. Can you reiterate some of those benefits?
So a healthy track record. So so two things. One is from the perspective of a potential creditor, they want to be able to clearly identify that this person has demonstrated they have been paying their bills on a timely manner. So that means we can trust them to give them a line of credit, a new line of credit, or increase it, right? That's the reason why it's important. Secondly, I personally believe that it's a habit that you actually should develop with regards to paying your bills on time and saving, because these habits you start once they're small, no matter how further in your career you get or how much more money you make, those habits stay with you. So you start small and start these habits. It doesn't matter if you're making 20,000 a year. By the time you're making 100, you have developed those habits and you're going to continue it all the way through.
That is so true. So I know that if you guys have any questions or any concerns or any other comments that you want to reach out to our guests today, Judy and Quadri, please look into our chat section where we have our contact information, as well as mine from the Detroit Chamber. We also have a student who's asking, can we connect with you guys on LinkedIn?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Please do.
Yep. At any time.
That's awesome. And once again, we at the Chamber are so excited to have you join us. And we want our students and our guests to understand that this is an exclusive opportunity for you to connect with our community leaders, with some major forces in the Detroit community. So please take advantage of this. And thank you so much for joining us.